Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. And today we have Cairn 123 in the British Tier 9 destroyer HMS Jutland in a Tier 10 battle here on the Islands of Ice map. Sorry, what's that? Scandinavians at the back, speak up. It's not pronounced Jutland, it's the Jutland. Oh really? Well, the day Denmark decide to start building D-class destroyers, they can name them whatever they like and they can argue the toss about how they're supposed to be pronounced, but this is a British destroyer and it's called the Jutland. We're British around here and we have a very long and proud tradition of completely ignoring the way people pronounce the names of their own countries and cities. Isn't that right, Paris? So Jutland it is. The Danes are all going, it's our bloody peninsula. And the Germans are going, hang on, half of it's ours. And we're going, yeah, well, it's our destroyer, so you can all shut up. Right then, HMS Jutland. Glad we settled that one. Now, despite the fact that this is a Tier 10 battle, Cairn's actually gotten off quite lightly with this matchmaking. There are no carriers. And there's probably only one radar ship on the enemy team, the Des Moines. Okay, the Minotaur and the Neptune could have radar, but they probably don't. Now the thing about these Tier 9 and 10 British destroyers is that they only have 113mm guns, which is frankly bizarre because the real things had 114mm guns, but to all practical intents and purposes the calibre may as well be the same. They have the same effect. What that means is that these destroyers, in the same way that the Japanese gunboat destroyers, starting with the Akazuki with their 100mm guns, had to have a penetration buff to their high explosive shells because they were incapable, unless they took the IFHE skill, incapable of damaging destroyers of the same tier or higher. Because they just didn't have enough penetration to even beat a destroyer's armour plating with their high explosive shells. And the Jutland and the Daring have the same issue, because they only have 113mm guns. And high explosive shells fired by 113mm guns are good enough to get through exactly 18.83mm, rounded up to 19mm of plating. Surely that's enough, Jingles? Tier 8, 9 and 10 destroyers, except for you, Khabarovsk, have 19mm of plating. Well, yeah, but you have to beat that 19mm, so they would need at least 19.5mm of high explosive penetration. And I think that would mean 117mm guns, or possibly 118, which they don't have. And they also don't have the high explosive penetration buff band-aid that was given to the Japanese destroyers with the 100mm guns, which would allow them to penetrate 19mm of plating. So, if you're in a British Tier 9 or 10 destroyer... Oh, that's not good. That's a Minotaur. Yeah, that's very bad. Right on the other side of the island. Okay, the Minotaur can't shoot at him, but everybody else can. So, yeah. Really big steps in the other direction, I think. We want to get out of view range of him very, very quickly. Now, of course, it was just what's known as the assured detection range. He got within 2.5 kilometres, regardless of the fact that there was no line of sight because the island was in the way. They immediately proximity detected each other. Now, he does have very good concealment on this thing, of course, 5.7 kilometres, but, well, he saw the Minotaur saw him. So the Minotaur should be running Hydro with a destroyer in this close. But he isn't. Okay, he's coming out trying to torpedo the Daring. Load the armour-piercing, boys. Yeah. See, this was how they compensated for the British destroyers having such terrible high explosive, unless they invest in the very expensive 4-point IFHE skill for their high explosive shells. They gave them increased penetration angles on the armour piercing. Thing is, that only really works against other destroyers if they're giving you not a flat broadside, but enough broadside. If that destroyer angles away and starts running away from you, you are just going to bounce with your armour piercing shells, and your high explosive, unless you have the IFHE skill, is just going to shatter. And we can tell that Cairn does have the IFHE skill because his high explosive shells are actually doing some damage to that grosser Kurfürst over there. Even so, he still has to hit it in the superstructure. Shots that hit anywhere else on the deck, on the belt, bows, stern, they're just going to shatter and not do any damage. Although, don't forget, even a high explosive shell that shatters and does no direct damage, still has a chance of starting a fire. And he managed to start a fire on the Grosser Kerr first, and he instantly damage conned it. Which is very bad news for that guy, because Cairn was not the only one shooting at him, and he now has multiple fires set after his damage control expired. There's the Minotaur again. What is he doing? Why didn't he just shoot Cairn when he came out? Why did he try to torpedo a destroyer? Don't forget, British destroyer, they get this short range but very, very long duration hydro. You're never going to torpedo a British destroyer that's conscious and knows what they're doing when their hydro is up and running. Hydro doesn't help you dodge incoming shells, though. The Minotaur should definitely have fired at him, rather than wasting torpedoes on a destroyer that was about to duck into cover behind an island and had its hydro up and running. And the Minotaur was close enough to be within hydro range, so he would have known that Cairn was running hydro, but, well, he didn't, and so Cairn still has almost all of his health intact. These 113mm guns are the thing that make British Tier 9 and 10 destroyers probably a bit more difficult to play than most other destroyers, because you can't just spam high explosive at everything. There are situations where your high explosive is going to do no damage whatsoever, and you pretty much have to fire armor piercing. But if the target is angled, your armor piercing is likewise probably going to do no damage whatsoever. You see, this is exactly what it was like for the Akazuki, the Kitakazi, and the Harugumo, because they only had 100mm guns. And unless they had the IFHE skill, they pretty much couldn't damage anything with their high explosive shells either. So the Japanese destroyers got a 1/5 caliber Band-Aid slapped onto their high explosive penetration. The British destroyers didn't. They had the caliber of their guns artificially lowered to 113mm for no good reason that I can think of. And instead, they were given increased penetration angles on their armor piercing. I appreciate that Wargaming didn't want to introduce a pair of destroyers that were basically just clones of the Akazuki, the Harugumo, and the Kitakazi, but I can't help but feel that the Brits got the raw end of the deal there. Then again, these still handle like destroyers in the way that the Kitakazi and the Harugumo in particular don't. They're big ships, they're not particularly quick, and they're relatively easy to hit. And there was the enemy Yugumo. And again, just the fact that he's even doing damage to a Tier 9 destroyer with high explosive tells us straight away that he does have that inertia fuse high explosive shell skill. Without it, none of these shots would be doing any damage whatsoever, and he would have to fire armor piercing, but the Yugumo was angled, and so the armor piercing would probably have been bouncing as well. But he did have the IFHE skill, and he was able to sink the Yugumo. Now, that of course is the enemy Tier 10 destroyer, the Khabarovsk. And even with the IFHE skill, he's going to have to hit that guy in the superstructure in order to do any damage. But the Khabarovsk is now giving him a broadside to shoot at. So now he switches to the armor piercing. And you can definitely damage a Khabarovsk that's giving you broadside with these 113mm guns when you've got the armor piercing loaded. And this, boys and girls, is a prime example of how to not play the Khabarovsk. The Khabarovsk's big strength is in its guns, not in its torpedoes. Although if you can hit something with Khabarovsk torpedoes, they are going to take a lot of damage. But yes, he was sailing broadside so he could get his torpedoes away. Yes, the torpedoes have been detected. Of course they've been detected. This is a British destroyer. It's got an exceptionally good self-defense hydroacoustic search. And all the time he wasn't shooting at Cairn was shooting at him. And these 113mm armor piercing shells, if somebody provides you with the best possible target in the world, like this Khabarovsk has done, they do a lot of damage very, very quickly. Now he's taken some damage in return, but the Khabarovsk should have easily won that gunfight, but he made some very bad decisions, and so he didn't. Of course, Cairn can't really afford to win too many more gunfights like that. He's on fire, he's got barely any health left, and he's just been radared. That'll be the enemy Des Moines. However, nobody really appears to be in a position to shoot at him. So, thank God for that. Now, if the fire can just burn out... Yeah, it looks like he's actually going to get away with it. That was a real waste of a radar. I mean, using the radar to spot destroyers is obviously good and something that radar cruisers and destroyers that have radar, and battleships that have radar, for that matter, should definitely be doing. But it helps if you use that radar when either you or other members of your team are actually in a position to shoot at the targets that get detected by it. Otherwise, you may as well be carrying a fighter plane consumable for all the good that your radar's doing. You've just wasted a charge of your consumable. Not that Cairn's complaining, I'm sure. Oh my god, are those just... those torpedoes? Yeah, he's actually scored a torpedo hit. Those torpedoes are still going. Let's keep an eye on them. Yep, more torpedo hits. Well, sometimes the mind just boggles. I mean, how the hell did they manage to run into those torpedoes? First he was spotted by the Yugamo. He sank the Yugamo. Then he was spotted by the Khabarovsk. He sank the Khabarovsk. Then he was radared by the Des Moines. All of those ships knew there was a destroyer around the corner. One of them found out the hard way by running into the torpedoes, which then of course meant that all of the other torpedoes were detected, and yet they still managed to get another 2 hits. So, I just... yeah, I got nothing. I can't even begin to explain that. Time to get out of here now, of course. He popped smoke, which allowed him to farm a bit of damage on the Attigo, but, well, British destroyer smoke does not last very long. It's generally just a, oop, I've been spotted, shoot and scoot thing. You get a lot of charges, but the duration isn't great. And there's a Massachusetts coming around the corner. And you definitely don't want to get caught within range of a Massachusetts secondaries when you're in a destroyer with 2,500 health. Okay, his torpedoes are back up. And he's going to go for single fire torpedoes against that Massachusetts. It looks like he's kind of stuck on the corner. And then suddenly, plot twist out of nowhere, devastating strike, liquidator award, he just sank the Neptune. What Neptune? Well, 2 of those torpedoes that he fired earlier, that the entire enemy team saw coming, hit a Neptune and caused flooding. Which means that Neptune has been flooding for almost an entire minute and a half without doing anything about it. In fact, looking at the timing, it was probable that he couldn't do anything about it because he was using the free damage control consumable, which has a cooldown of exactly a minute and a half, which means that if he'd just been able to stay alive for another 3 or 4 seconds, well, he probably would have stayed alive. But he was cheap, and so he died. And there goes the Massachusetts. That's kill number 4. Yeah, if only there was some way of knowing that there was a destroyer around when he parked up on that corner. Oh, there's the Minotaur. Well, there was the Minotaur, he's just smoked up. Now, Cairn only fired 2 torpedoes from one of the launchers at the Massachusetts, which means that technically he still has 2 launchers ready to go, and so he's emptied them in the direction of the Minotaur's smokescreen. Although there were only 3 torpedoes in one of those salvos. Now, at this point, they're ahead on kills, they're ahead on points, and they're ahead on caps. Cairn's team would have to really try hard to throw this game in order to lose it. But stranger things have happened at sea, so let's not get complacent. The Des Moines over there, remember, has a 9.45 kilometer radar. If he pops his radar now, Cairn's in a lot of trouble. But then a sudden opportunity appears, and he decides it's worth the risk, because the Des Moines guns aren't pointing at him, and he is trying to recover some health. Although if he doesn't hit him in the superstructure, he's not going to do any damage with a high explosive, but maybe he can set him on fire? Whoa, hang on a second. Okay, the Des Moines has been put out of his misery, which means he's no longer spotted, but 2 more torpedo hits. I think he hit that Yamato over there, who's suddenly on 25,000 health. But remember, at the point where he launched the torpedoes, the Yamato wasn't even visible. The torpedoes were actually aimed in the general direction of the Minotaur. The thing is, once Mr. Torpedo leaves the tube, he is no longer your nor anybody else's friend. They don't really care what they hit, regardless of whether they knew there was anything there or not. Speaking of which, it won't be long, just 25 seconds, and he will be able to fire off yet more torpedoes, which are definitely, with 2,500 health remaining, going to be his primary weapon of choice. Oh, there's the Minotaur. Gone undetected. Great, they've just lost a ship. Looks like the Minotaur finally managed to hit something with his torpedoes. Well, he must be very proud of himself. God knows he's been trying hard enough. Well, there's no flooding damage, so we know that the Yamato has damage controlled, which means that fire's permanent. Oh, this is kind of risky. I mean, we know that that Minotaur is averse to using his guns, but this kind of tempting target, you have to expect you're going to get shot at. I mean, okay, the Yamato's guns aren't pointing in the right direction, but the Minotaur? And yet nobody's targeting him. Seriously, when I'm playing a destroyer that only has 2,500 health remaining, when I fire my guns, can I have nobody shoot at me as well? Thanks. That would be fun. That would be great. Okay, he's popped his smoke, but there were at least 10 seconds there where a low health destroyer was spotted, and he's managed to add an additional fire to the Yamato's problems. Although it looks like his damage control has just come off cooldown and he's used it. But I think it's these torpedoes that are going to be a slightly bigger source of pain for the Yamato than any lingering fires. The question is, nope, I don't think he's going to hit with any of those torpedoes. Now he might set another fire, because we know the Yamato's just used his damage control. But he executed that turn and then accelerated away fast enough that none of those torpedoes are going to hit him. Of course, he's probably still not going to survive because he's getting shot at by the Vanguard with high explosives, so he's probably going to burn to death. But none of those torpedoes are going to hit him. The Minotaur, on the other hand, despite having the Yamato spot all of the torpedoes for him, despite being in one of the most manoeuvrable cruisers in the game, and despite having his own hydroacoustic surge consumable, yeah, he ran into all of the torpedoes. And there's the Kraken unleashed. And the Confederate. I'm pretty sure I saw the Confederate pop up there as well. Yep, there it is at the top of the screen, next to the rest of the medal ribbons. At this point, they've got the game in the bag. This is pretty much unwinnable for the enemy team, and you're really just now trying to farm as much damage as possible. So he's managed to set a fire on the Yamato, and then, oh shit, the Hindenburg. Now, they've almost certainly won this game, but it would be nice to at least survive until the end of the match. And the Hindenburg, practically on full health, and with a very long-range hydro, is closing in to try to get himself a consolation kill. And Ken is saved at the last second by the Yamato, who was gracious enough to burn to death as a result of the fire that Ken set, granting him his 6th kill, pushing the score over 1,000 points, and securing the win for the team. Ken would like to thank the enemy team for this win, without whose bungling incompetence it almost certainly wouldn't have been possible, and certainly wouldn't have been as amusing to watch. I hope you all enjoyed it. Ken, thank you very much for sending that one in. Well done on your spectacular base XP of nearly 3,500. And as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.